Hello, welcome to day 2 of the Liverpool Fashion Summit. Today, we're concentrating on the circular economy and we're joined by Dr. Helen Goworek. Helen, good morning.
Hi, Ollie.
How are things?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, looking good. Are you okay?
Yeah, we're all good. How have you been coping with God, it feels like for ages now, doesn't it? The lockdown.
Yeah, it's self-isolating. Yeah, just keeping out of it all, taking great care, and just being supported by amazing companies that will deliver things to us. And it's gone well, all things considered. Thank you.
Yeah, it's probably a really good phrase to end it on, all things considered, isn't
Yeah,
it? I think we're all feeling that a little bit. All things considered, yeah, not too bad. So,
yeah,
Helen, you're at the University of Durham, is that right?
that's right. Yeah, in the
So do you
business.
want to tell us, a little bit about your research and the connection to the fashion and circular economy?
Yeah, so I research into sustainable fashion in general. I'm about to start work on a project that does focus particularly on the circular economy, but it's inevitably part of what I cover in general. So I look at that area. I'm in the marketing department, so I have a look at a variety of different sectors in my work itself, but my experience is in the fashion business. I worked in fashion for 7 years, both as a designer and buyer. So I've been very product focused and very conscious of what goes into that, how the supply chains work. I've visited supply chains as part of my job over the years and so on. So it means that it really helped me to have those insights about how things operate on both sides of the fence. I've worked for companies that have overseas factories that they own, or ones that they work with as part of subcontracting and so on. So it's really helped and informed my research. So my research tends to be mainly focusing on people in business and talking to them in companies, especially about sustainable fashion and how they operate. So I've done a couple of large projects that I've been involved in with a team of former colleagues from Nottingham Trent University.
Yeah.
In particular, they were funded by Defra, which meant that we had the luxury of going into depth, talking to people who are in the business, but also talking to consumers and getting their insights. So we've had those projects where you can get quite a broad view of the different perspectives of the stakeholders within the circular economy. A more recent project we've done looked at the longevity of clothing and looking at the practicalities of how that can be built in. And of course, you can imagine that front stage is really important. So at the front end, when you're trying to develop the products themselves, that's really important. But also, I think we have to take responsibility as producers and consumers, because the maintenance of clothing is actually where you've got the biggest carbon footprint. So once those products actually get to us, then what we do with them, how we wash them or care for them, or how long we keep them, has a big impact. So although obviously in the media there's an emphasis on the producers and how far away the products are made and so on, they are significant, but actually we've got more power as consumers. And as researchers, if we can spread out that information to consumers and let them know that how they behave is having the biggest impact, and that's the key thing. So I believe very much in taking joint responsibility across retail, manufacturing, consumption, and any other stakeholders that are involved. So I think that's really the key message that's come out of my research. And then, as well as those major Defra projects, they've had kind of spin-off projects where we've looked at specific aspects from these big research projects, breaking them down into key questions that we think are of interest, and using the data for those. So they're the main sustainable fashion projects that I've done. And it was all sparked off by going to an industry conference in 2006. I went to an Association of Suppliers to British Clothing Industry conference, And going to that conference was absolutely crucial. And I always try where I can to go to industry conferences as well as academic ones, because I think you get quite a different perspective and
Yeah.
a very current perspective that's very impactful. And it was when M&S were just about to launch Plan A, and somebody came and told us about that. I think Julian Allwood was there, who had just done the Well Dressed report, which is available if anyone wants to look that up. Cambridge Institute of Manufacturing, Well Dressed. That was a really seminal report that looked at all different aspects there. And from that initial talk, I thought this is something that I could really get behind, something really important. It looked at various aspects of sustainability. It was really the first time I'd been exposed to it in a major way, other than those general kind of trends towards being more sustainable for the environment that happened in the 70s and the early 90s, which I'd been conscious of, but seemed quite distant and sort of short-lived in a major kind of impact way. And then around 2006, things started to take off. And then in my book on fashion buying, I was lucky enough to interview Safia Minney from People Tree, who's written the Slow Fashion book that I know a lot of participants will be aware of. And she very kindly gave me some time out of her incredibly busy schedule to discuss things. So I wrote it up in that book, and then I did an article on it, and that article also went along with my development of publications and led to my PhD and so on. So my academic and research background has been very much tied in with this. And thanks to people in industry who've been so kind in giving their time and really getting involved.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I noted then. Obviously, as an academic, you go to academic conferences, but also you're sort of advocating to go for practitioner-based conferences as well. And so I think whilst anyone who's watching this will already have this, or already living out this principle, but it's similar to that individual responsibility that you mentioned as well, of sometimes you have to go out and find the information for yourself and not just wait for it to come to you. And that might be a little bit more easier in the age of social media and the internet and upcoming 5G and all these different things. But there's something about being conscious of what you do and conscious of how you are engaging with fashion, etc., things like that, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about being proactive, and I think that's pretty much what the circular economy is. I know that it takes some thought, it takes some effort to engage with that, rather than just being reactive to whatever is happening around us. So I think that's the way to go, to try and find out what you can, relevant information, searching for it, and trying to be in the right places to get that information. And then sharing that information out as well. And I know obviously it's called the sharing economy, but I don't think it's just about sharing the products and that kind of thing, but that sharing information is absolutely central. I think I've really benefited from that, and I think so many of us can. So I think what we have to do is be careful that we're not being too preachy, though. Or just preaching to the converted. So I think that there are two potential dangers. So if, for example, we ran a sustainability module quite some years ago when I was working at Nottingham Trent, and we had a good take up for it, but we suspect they're the people who are already interested in that. So there's an argument for integrating information in existing modules rather than just offering a sustainability module, good though that is, and it should be on offer. So I think sharing that information is central, but not in too much of a pushy way, because I think that will turn people off, especially those who are thinking, I have to spend more money, I have to go out of my way. I think that's the general perception about being more sustainable and engaging in the circular economy. And sometimes that is true, but it's not always true. And sometimes it can be easier and cheaper. So I think we need to share it in a kind of equitable and fair way without imposing on others who simply might choose to do something else that we don't particularly want to, we don't want them to do. Integrated within some of the research that we did, and this might be useful for some of the viewers, is that there's a research framework that was put together for Defra at the same time as we were doing a project. So we used it as a framework, and it's a way to segment your customers. So instead of saying by age group or location and so on, it was a framework based on their behaviour towards sustainability, and they put people into 7 different categories. So this is also something that's available. I'll share links if that would.
We can put them up.
Yeah, so this is really helpful, and they go from one very, very green category on this matrix down to category 7, which is a group that are just not considered. They know there might be something happening in terms of the environment, but they don't really care, and they're not going to engage with it. And then we've got all those kind of shades in between where we've got people fitting into. So that's quite useful to look at. And with students, what I would often do is ask them to look at that and say, can you assess which group you would actually fit into, and then think which group you want to be into, or where you might be in 5 years, and so on, so that they can relate to that. And again, I'm not imposing on them, this is what you've got to do, but then they can decide for themselves, what could I actually do? And it does look at that willingness and also ability to act, which is in much of the literature as well, so it connects to that. So yeah, so I would recommend that if anybody's trying to work out those sort of categories, whether they're in design or marketing or any other field, really. I find that quite useful. So it's great to be able to build on other people's research and then take it from there. And it's been great to see that emerge, looking back at this starting point for me in 2006, where people have taken the ideas and run with them and looked at specific aspects. And there's a reasonable amount of literature out there now, whereas there was virtually nothing around 2010 when I published the People Tree article.
I suppose that framework allows one to develop almost like a personal plan, but can it be sort of abstracted up to a business or a design or a label level as well?
It can, and that is a brilliant idea for someone to do some research on. Yeah, I haven't come across it if that has happened, but yeah, do you know, that is a brilliant idea. So if that's next project for us. I don't know, somebody may have done it. I'm going to look that up afterwards and see, and if not, we've got ourselves a research project now.
Yeah, we certainly have. But and there's something before we were talking about not pushing information onto people, and it has to almost be a bit more of an invitation. But there's potential to bring some of our knowledge about behavioral economics in there as well. And there's this, I can't remember who it is, I think it grew from the work by Richard Thaler, the nudge theory, and it's nudge, hug, shove, smack. So it's 4 different ways to get information to people based on the proclivity of them to defend against new ideas or openness to new ideas. So there's definitely something in that as well, which we can all think about as well. But I just want to go back, Helen, just to the distributed responsibility that we spoke of, or sorry, that you spoke of around. It is businesses, it is retailers, it is manufacturers, but it's almost consumers as well. And you said one of I think it was the Defra project, you spoke to both businesses and, I'll label them all as businesses and consumers. Was there any tension between those 2 groups?
I think to some extent, yeah. So there is a tendency for whichever group you're in to give the other group the responsibility. Just a tendency. I'm not saying that was in any extreme way. And when we spoke to consumers in the first project, and this was back in 2008 when we were looking at this, we did focus groups. And we asked the people what they thought about about sustainability. And at that point, there was very little information there. But once they were told information, so after we'd got their initial opinions, we told them about some different brands and so on. And immediately, some of them became very engaged in it. Once they'd got that information, some even became quite politicised and were saying, so, well, the government needs to do something about this. They need to set some rules up for people to follow, or a major company needs to do this and make everything sustainable so that everybody else follows. And that kind of thing was coming out of it. So I'm not saying that everyone was saying that, and we tend to think about the ones that are notable or speak loudest and so on, but there was that coming out of pockets of the groups there. And we did the groups across the UK in the Midlands, North and South, to see if there was any difference perhaps across the country. We didn't find any in particular. We did it in Manchester, Nottingham, St Albans. So so that was interesting. And then in the more recent project that we did, we looked at different categories. Instead of location categories, we looked at, we asked students for their opinions, we asked parents for their opinions for buying children's clothes, and then we asked people who were mainly in their 40s and 50s for their views. So that we didn't cover every perspective, but we had some significant ones. And that project was much more based on the producers. First one was much more consumption orientated. So we asked people what they thought about, for example, buying new clothes, buying secondhand and so on. And we did find that this younger one of the groups with students were much more inclined to buy secondhand clothes, for example, and obviously saw that as quite a cool thing, because that is something that has a much longer term kind of trend in itself. So at my age, secondhand was absolutely the thing to buy when I was a teenager. That was a really cool thing to do. It was also pretty much just what we could afford, and they were the sort of places to hang out. So in my teens, Saturday afternoons were spent at flea markets with friends, and that was the absolute highlight of our week. So I'm not sure what that says about the rest of the things that we did. And we didn't have social media or anything like that. We didn't even have the internet, but that was a really interesting thing. And now my daughter, who's 23, would be really interested in doing that, even though she is very active on social media and socializing, that kind of thing. And it's actually come full circle, because she spent a year managing a vintage clothes shop, so it's come right round. So with her, it's not out of necessity, because she has been able to buy into brands prior to that as well, and did work for a bigger, more branded kind of company previously. But I think that the trend in itself, we found that secondhand clothes stores went very quiet for some time around the 90s and early 2000s, and then they've really picked up. And so in Leicester, where I live, that you've got a variety of different secondhand stores. I'm sure it's the same in Liverpool. I know it is in Glasgow and various places. So you've got the ones who want to go for the kind of branded sporty look, and then you've got the ones who want more vintage, who want to dress up in 40s clothing or 60s and so on. So they seem to have segmented themselves in different sort of niches, so that's expanding. So I think that's part of something that's driving that circular economy, and is the most obvious sort of aspect of it in clothing, but not the only aspect, I would say.
Well, so I think a couple of things have just come to my mind. What you've highlighted is that with this tension between brands and consumers, looking at the distribution across the age groups and across geographies as well, it's not easy, is it? There's so many different things at play in this, with only partial solution, and in the entire ecosystem of people who are involved in it. It's a really complex thing. But then the other thing that I really liked, and you've just given me an idea as well, is what you mentioned about your daughter. Yourself going to a flea market, making a day of it with your friends, and your daughter potentially doing the same thing. I think being part of a community, say a fashion community or a flea market community or a secondhand vintage, because I suppose they're a bit sexier words, community who engages in these types of practices and actually makes a day of it, makes an event of it. That's potentially a really nice, a really positive thing to be doing as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And in order to persuade people to consider being more sustainable, or nudge them, as you said, I think we need to use very positive stories. And research has generally shown that people would switch off from negative stories. So there's a very good book on sustainability literacy, which is free to download. And I found that very useful. It covers lots of different aspects. And one of the key things that they say is avoid the negative doom and gloom if you can. And we know that, that is real and that's out there. But if you can sell them positive things, otherwise people will think, oh, it's hopeless. Why should I bother to do anything? And perhaps I shouldn't say sell, because I'm not talking about selling really. Marketing background, I apologise. So trying to persuade people with positive and fun things that they can do, and being part of that kind of cool community is a really good aspect in terms of the circular economy, and can help us to move that forward. And that integration between age groups as well, so it's not just people in their teens and 20s are the only ones that can get involved in this, but the fact that we can appeal to people in different age groups and perhaps in different ways. So it might be that for younger people it's better to buy second hand, because it also comes with that bonus of better prices in some cases, and then perhaps people who are have got higher income might think, okay, I'll look for an organic brand or something along those lines. So I think we can have different ways of interpreting and responding to the circular economy. I think something that we're missing out on a bit over here, and of course Scandinavia tends to be ahead of us in terms of the circular economy, is building on clothing libraries as well that are working over there, and we have more of an opportunity to do that. So maybe it's not just done in that standard sort of vintage shop way, but there are other ways to do that. And I know certainly that there are companies out there who are doing various things that give you that opportunity to perhaps rent clothes, and obviously that's been done for quite a while with handbags, and it's been done more with clothing in general now. So that's another opportunity and approach to it. Maybe that's positive. That's like a special treat, isn't it, to think have that designer outfit. So at the Drapers Sustainable Fashion meeting, Jane Shepherdson was talking there and was dressed absolutely fantastically. She was being interviewed on stage, and she pointed out that she was just hiring what she was wearing. Whereas that's quite a change from her Topshop days, where that might not have been the case, I guess. So when somebody really significant and important and influential in the industry is taking that approach as well, then I think that's really positive.
And that's not necessarily a brand new model conceptually, because we've been hiring wedding dresses, we've been hiring groomsmen for years and years and years and years. So there we go. There's a business idea for anyone who's watching. Helen, I think that's our time, but you've been wonderful. We've done your research and we've got so much out of it as well. We'll try to get the links off you and pop them in the comments or section below. But thank you very much for all your insight and your time, and we'll hopefully see you at the round table as well.
Okay, no problem. Thanks so much for asking me to participate. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thanks, Helen.